I was terrified to learn that NASA detected a horrifying object lurking in the cosmos. I never should have opened that door. The news hit me hard, like a slap across my face. It was supposed to be another normal day. I sipped my coffee, scrolling through my phone, the world outside bright and sunny. But that headline stopped me cold. My heart raced, an electric jolt of fear sparking through my veins. They called it a celestial anomaly, something so bizarre that scientists struggled to classify it. An object, they said, with a trajectory that brought it dangerously close to Earth. I could almost feel the chill seeping into my bones. I glanced out my window, the day still beautiful, yet it felt like a lie. The whispers of panic began to creep in. What could it be? Something sentient? Or worse, something evil lurking in the void? The shadows in my living room suddenly felt thicker, heavier. The darkness at the corner of the room seemed to sway, pulses of anxiety thrumming in my chest. I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts away. I was being ridiculous. Yet, as the sunlight faded into a murky twilight, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the house. My pulse quickened. What was that? I hesitated, feeling the blood drain from my face. I stepped into the dim hallway, the air colder than I remembered. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a warning, every whisper of the wind an omen. I reached the door, hand trembling as it hovered over the knob. An inexplicable dread pulsed inside me. What if I shouldn't open it? The noises grew louder. Scratching, shuffling, something wanting to break free. My breath caught in my throat. I clenched my fists, preparing for the worst. I was just about to turn and run when the door swung open, revealing a pitch-black void. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads-up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The void beyond the door pulsed with darkness, as if it were alive and breathing, drawing me closer against my will. I hesitated, heart pounding like a drum in my chest, but an unseen force seemed to pull me into the abyss. With trembling hands I stepped into the darkness, leaving the warm glow of my home behind. As my foot crossed the threshold, the air thickened, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I gasped, trying to inhale, but all that filled my lungs was the stale scent of something ancient and decayed. The door slammed shut behind me, sealing my fate with a finality that sent chills racing down my spine. Panic rushed through me. The silence was profound. I squinted into the shadows, trying to discern any shapes or outlines, but it was so black that it felt as though my eyes were closed. I reached out my hand, fingers brushing against the cold surface of a wall. Instinctively, I began to walk forward, guided only by that lingering sense of dread, my every step echoing ominously as if the darkness itself was watching, waiting. A low hum started to vibrate around me, a resonating sound that seemed to bounce off the walls, growing louder and more chaotic as I moved deeper. I could feel the hairs on my neck standing on end, a primal instinct screaming for me to turn back, but curiosity pushed me onwards. What was this place? What awaited me in the dark? Suddenly, the humming transformed into a cacophony of whispers, too soft to decipher but unmistakable in their intent. They clawed at my mind, wrapping around my thoughts like tendrils. Fear seeped deeper into my bones. I had to find a way out. I turned, the sudden swiftness of my movement sending a jolt of air brushing past me, as if something had rustled beside me. My breath hitched in my throat again. I thought I saw movement in the corner of my vision, a shadow shifting too quickly to catch, skirting along the walls. My heart raced. It felt as if I wasn't alone. Something lurked just beyond my sight. A soft thud echoed behind me. I spun around, heart pounding fast, but there was nothing there, only the oppressive void, Another noise broke through the whispers, a deliberate scratching sound, closer this time, like fingernails dragging along the concrete. A surge of dread tore through me, forcing me to take a few shaky steps back. I couldn't see it, whatever it was, but the air grew colder, thicker. A sickening presence loomed just beyond sight. Ahead, a flicker of reluctant light pulled at me, an ethereal glow that seemed both inviting and terrifying. I took a hesitant step toward it, driven by a mixture of fear and an irresistible need to know what could be waiting in the glow of that light. As I approached, the whispers crescendoed into a frenzied chorus. Each syllable seemed to curl around my mind, weighty with malice. Just as I reached out toward the source of illumination, the ground began to tremble beneath me, a deep rumble that reverberated through the darkness. With a blinding flash, the light burst forth, illuminating the area in a surreal way. Terrified yet curious, my eyes widened at the sight. It appeared to be a distorted reflection of my living room, but twisted, a nightmarish version of my sanctuary. On every wall, shadows writhed and distorted, faces pressed against the surface, mouths moving in silent screams. Everything shifted again, and the light flickered, leaving me teetering on the brink of reality and whatever lay in this dark abyss. But it wasn't just the fleeting nature of the illumination that sent shivers down my spine. Inside the distorted mirage, I saw the silhouette of a figure, the edges sharp, almost human, with a spine that curved unnaturally. My breath caught in my throat as the figure pointed directly at me, eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity, an invitation or perhaps a warning. Panic surged again, and I backed away, realizing I had wandered into something I could never understand, somewhere I might never return from. Then, without warning, the voices grew deafening, drowning out my thoughts. The whispers turned into a shriek, reaching a cacophonous pitch that vibrated through my very being, then suddenly fell silent. I was alone again, with the figure now stepping beyond the confines of the light, advancing towards me, and as dread enveloped me in a claustrophobic grip, I realized I had no more escape routes left. The last thing I saw was the glint of razor-sharp teeth, and the twisted smile of that primal creature as it lunged. The darkness closed in, swallowing my scream whole. In that suffocating moment, I felt gravity shift. An overwhelming gurgling sound resonated as if the fabric of reality itself was tearing apart. And just before the abyss consumed me, a voice echoed in my mind, chilling and familiar, whispering words I understood all too well. "Did you think the door would ever lead you home?" The world collapsed around me, and in that haunting silence I realized I was never meant to open that door. The rumble subsided, but the silence that followed was far more sinister. I opened my eyes to a new reality, one that lay beyond the darkness that had swallowed me whole. I was no longer standing in my entryway. Instead, I found myself sprawled on a cold, hard surface, slick with something wet and revolting beneath me. My heart raced as I rose unsteadily, shaking off the remnants of lingering terror. The air smelled of death and decay, a putrid aroma that clawed at my throat and turned my stomach. Panic gripped me again as I took in my surroundings. I seemed to be in a cavernous room, the walls lined with pulsating veins of some dark substance that glowed faintly, a sickly green hue casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed like tortured souls. Everything felt surreal, as if gravity feasted on fear itself. A soft, rhythmic thumping echoed like a heartbeat, reverberating through my bones. I stepped cautiously towards a vague shape ahead, half hidden in the gloom. As I approached, it became clearer. It was a mirror, fractured and ominous, reflecting ghostly images of distorted versions of myself. Each reflection presented a twisted possibility: a wife who never left me, a sibling who had refused to speak to me, faces of friends whose futures I destroyed, each shrouded in sorrow. I turned my back on the mirror, as if the truth contained within it was too unbearable to bear. But then I heard a soft voice, a familiar cadence that sent more chills cascading down my spine. It was my mother's voice, soothing yet laden with an unrecognizable undertone. "Join us," she called, her tone inviting yet ominous. "Mom?" I breathed, spinning around, desperation clawing my throat. The shadows of those I loved twisted and morphed in the reflections, each one reaching out as if to beckon me closer, dragging me down into their pain. I staggered back, gasping as the floor shifted beneath me, seeming to writhe with its own dark intent. "We're waiting," the figure of my mother whispered, emerging slowly from the shadows, her face both familiar and unimaginable, as if shaped from the very essence of my nightmares. There was a bruising darkness settling into her presence, a gaping void where light should have been. "You opened the door, darling. You brought us here." "No, no!" I protested, feeling the world around me enact a grim choreography, my screams swallowed mercilessly by the encroaching darkness. Yet the mirage twisted once more, the walls rippling as if they were alive, breathing in and out with malignant delight, the shadowy face of the creature from before looming behind my mother. I could barely breathe. Dread layered itself over me, crushing and suffocating. With a violent tremor, the chamber shook, and the heartbeat grew faster, filling the space with palpable fear. "You cannot escape what you have awakened. You belong to us now," my mother's reflection said, her mouth twisting into a wicked grin. In a panic, I turned and dashed towards the far wall, only to find it solid as stone. I hammered my fists against it, desperation surging through my veins like fire. The echoes of my own cries reverberated, merging with the chaotic whispers that filled the chamber. I could almost make out fragments of words submerged in the cacophony: door, sacrifice, and lost. Just as the heartbeat crescendoed to a fever pitch, the mirrors shattered violently, shards flying like daggers through the air. In that moment, my instinct kicked in, and I dove to the floor, avoiding the perilous points of glass. As I skidded to a stop, I landed next to something glimmering in the darkness. A key, intricately designed and pulsating, as if it were alive. My breath quickened. Could this be the key to escape whatever horror was unfolding? I reached for the key, heart racing in hope, but my fingers brushed against the cold metal, and suddenly a piercing cry erupted from the depths of the room, a haunting sound that seemed to shake the core of reality itself. The shadows gathered, pooling like a thick mist, and a multitude of eyes opened, all staring directly at me, filled with fury and pain. They swirled with barely contained rage and despair, closing in around me in slow, dreadful waves. As I clutched the key tightly in my palm, the whispers crescendoed into howls of rage, and I realized I was standing at the precipice of an unspeakable choice. I could feel the weight of their eyes watching, waiting, hungry for my decision. What door would I open next? With nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, I felt an icy grip around my heart as the cacophony of cries reached its zenith. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" They screamed, an invitation laced with pure malice. And as I stood at the brink of the abyss and the shimmer of the key dimmed in my grasp, a single thought crystallized in my mind, sending me spiraling into despair. Perhaps there was no escape from the very darkness that I had invited in. The howls resonated, wrapping their tendrils of panic around me as the crescendo of voices transformed into a deafening roar, echoing endlessly in the cavernous chamber. I felt the air grow thick with the weight of countless souls pressing against me, clawing through the darkness. With every heartbeat, I understood I was not alone. I inhabited the body of someone irrevocably linked to this realm of horror. The key felt alien in my hand, its cold metal biting against the heat of my flesh. I could sense the whispers of the shadows beckoning closer, the painful memories of my life swirling into a maelstrom of chaos behind my eyelids. Each flicker of darkness pulled me back to the moment I had opened the door to this madness, the initial curiosity that had transformed into raw fear. Suddenly, the ground beneath me convulsed like a living beast, taking on a new texture, rough and slick, as if it were made of flesh and blood. As if it were hungry. I stumbled, trying to gain my footing, but the seductive pull of the key gripped my soul more fiercely than the terror surrounding me. I felt it whisper to me, promising that each turn of the lock could lead me to a choice either to claim my own destiny or surrender to the insatiable void. With a throaty scream of defiance, I ran towards the center of the room where the mocking echoes chanted, "Join us! Join us!" I knew there had to be a door, a way to navigate through this relentless nightmare. My heart raced as I swung wildly, desperately seeking the elusive barrier that would grant me passage away from this torment. Then, in the midst of blinding panic, I spotted it, a door framed in blackened wood, cracked and splintered, draped under an incessant weight of shadow. Its handle gleamed, worn from ages of despair, directly opposite to where the pulsating light beckoned. This had to be it, I thought, lunging forward, the key swinging precociously in my palm. But with each hurried step, the shadows churned with renewed fury, swirling like a tempest as if sensing my intentions. The voices morphed into a cacophony, filling my mind with visions of torment, different lives, lost opportunities, darkened corridors leading only to further despair. Turn back! Turn back! They wailed, a cacophony of grief that crested like a hurricane. I felt the dread compressing against my chest, threatening to eradicate my determination as I reached the door. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the lock. The moment it fit snugly in place, a cold tide surged beneath me, raking its nails down my spine. I could see movement in the shadows, dark limbs stretching toward me, clawing with urgency. They were alive and hungry, their anger emanating like radiation, threatening to consume me whole. Join us! They shrieked in unison, their shrill voices coiling around my throat, trying to squeeze the will from my body. The door cannot protect you. You belong to us. Ignoring their pleas, I turned the key, a metallic whisper that resonated in the oppressive air. The lock clicked in that instant of terrible anticipation. I was both exhilarated and terrified by what I would feed the unknown. The door swung open, revealing an abyssal darkness within, deeper than the void itself, swirling as if other dimensions were colliding. But the moment the door cracked, the shadows erupted, a writhing mass bursting forth, the faces of those I loved contorted in agony, their mouths opening in silent screams. They poured into the room with malevolent intent, swirling like ink in water, as my knees buckled. I was overwhelmed, thrust into the center of this chaotic storm. The horrid realization crashed down on me. It was just my future at stake, but the multitude of souls, lost and broken, clamoring for release. I felt their pain surging through me, mingling with my own, each moment of despair eclipsing my will to fight. Past the disastrous chaos, I saw a familiar face, or what was left of it. It was my mother, her features softened but darkened, the void within her cascading like a never-ending chasm. "We all need you, darling," she crooned, reaching her gnarled hand out toward me, beckoning with insistent urgency. Fear paralyzed me. It was either them or me. The world outside this terrible place faded, forgotten, as I stood alone against the darkness, hopeless and grief-stricken. The shadows hadn't just claimed my life, they were clamoring for my very essence. And just when I thought I would collapse under the weight of the surrounding shadows, the key in my hand pulsed violently. A blinding light erupted from it, crashing against the darkness, and the chamber lurched violently as a new reality beckoned. The last thing I heard before the light consumed them: "You cannot escape who you are," and then everything, my scream, the shadows, my mother's silhouette dissolved into fragmented memories, scattering across the cosmos like dying stars, leaving me once again in the frightening embrace of the void. As the shards of existence settled around me like the remnants of a shattered mirror, I found myself suspended in a sphere of chaotic silence. A lingering fear thrummed in my veins, erasing the very memory of solid ground. I breathed in the emptiness, tasting both dread and an uncanny familiarity. Somewhere deep within, I understood that whatever this reality was, it was mine to navigate. I was trapped within a labyrinth of my own making. The abyss whispered, curling against my mind like wisps of smoke. Each fragment of memory that had dissolved before me waited in eager anticipation. Shivers surged along my spine as the sensation of eyes, countless eyes fixated upon me from the shadows, hidden in a darker recess of the void. I turned, but no entity took form, only indistinct phantoms beckoning me further into the murk. "Where am I?" My voice echoed back, a frail sound in the infinite darkness, swallowed unintentionally by the abyss. In the silence that followed, the shadows throbbed, pulsing like a heart that had long since stopped beating. Just as despair tightened its grip around my throat, a subtle glow materialized in the distance, an ethereal light suspended between the nothingness, flickering like a candle caught in an unrelenting storm. Driven by an instinct I could not refuse, I moved toward it. Threads of luminescence interwove themselves into patterns, creating distorted images that danced before my eyes. Faces emerged, each twisted with agony and despair, lost souls who had met their fate long before me. They clawed for my attention, mouths moving in unison, forming words that reached out only to dissolve back into the void. Each echo carried fragments too far beyond my comprehension, but their haunting cries filled the air with an unbearable weight of sorrow. No! I screamed at them, trying to sever the bond they sought to establish. Leave me be! But the images only grew more vivid, each scene tinged with a horrific familiarity. Faces from my past, a childhood friend, a stranger who had once held my hand in a moment of comfort, and then a shadowy figure who loomed larger than life, its outline indiscernible yet pregnant with menace. They too were trapped in this liminal space, lost to an eternity of torment, mere echoes of their former selves. The light pulsed, an invitation beckoning me closer, but dread coiled tightly around my heart, sensing the danger. I hesitated, torn between the allure of understanding and the fear of discovering what awaited me. As I inched nearer, the air grew thick, suffocating every breath tasted of ash and annihilation. Welcome back, a voice slithered into my ear, cold and serpentine. I turned sharply, heart racing, for I recognized the tone. It was her, a ghostly figure gliding forth from the veil, my mother, her features drawn and hollow like the faces of those encased in the light. Yet the smile she offered was twisted, horrifying, a jagged cut against the features I once knew. You can't hide from your past, dear. You're meant to join us. She gestured toward the swirling chaos of souls behind her, each one dancing between hope and despair. In that moment, the fragments of my life began to lock into place, memories illuminating the darkness like flashes of lightning through a storm. I felt a cold hand grip my heart, urging me to step deeper, leaving footprints of anguish tracing my journey. Suddenly, from the depths of the swirling light, a shadow uncoiled, slithering forward. Its mass morphed with an insatiable hunger, blending restlessly with the tortured souls, the embodiment of fear and grief itself. I realized then this was no mere specter but a thing born of suffering, seeking to claim me as one of its own. Join us, it hissed, weaving a web of despair around my very essence, tightening its grasp as I recoiled. The voices intensified, shrieking, wailing a sickening harmony, each note pushing me to despair, drowning out the rational part of my mind that screamed to flee. But retreat was impossible. The mere thought of fleeing twisted into a clenched knot in my stomach. I was rooted in place. The familiar glint of the key slipping from my grasp and clattering against the unforgiving ground, a dim light extinguishing in the shadows of my mind. Then, just as despair threatened to consume me whole, I saw it, a glimmering object rising from the void, reflecting what remained of my defiance. My mother's laughter echoed around me, sad and knowing, as the object transitioned from light to form. It was a mirror tarnished and ancient, its surface swirling with memories that were not my own. As I stared into it, I caught glimpses of other realms, vast and horrific, each reflection more sinister than the last. They pulled at my sanity, waiting for me to step through, to lose myself within their depths forever. But as I reached out, the surface of the mirror rippled violently, cracking like glass. The shadows lunged, no longer merely whispers of the past but a raging tempest, a horde of darkness hungry for my soul. I watched in horror as my reflection warped, revealing the monstrous entity that resided within. The figure of myself twisted amidst the chaos, mouthing silent screams, frantically pleading for escape. A new horror unfurled. I was not just facing my past, it was now coming for me, and in the deafening silence that followed, I knew with haunting certainty, I had awakened something far older, more malignant than I had ever anticipated, a force eager to envelop my very being. Then, I felt a sharp tug within me, a tether unspooling, unraveling. Fists of darkness surged forth, locking around my throat, and then it happened. From the depths of the void echoed a voice I hadn't heard in years, mocking me, a cold, cruel reminder from a long-lost dream. Remember who you are. With that, the ground beneath me shattered, and I plummeted into an abyss darker than any I could have imagined, knowing that whatever lay below had already begun to dance at the edges of my thoughts, waking up in horrifying anticipation of my arrival. The descent into the abyss was unrelenting, a painful plummet that stripped away the remnants of reality, leaving me suspended in a void that thickened around me like tar. The rush of wind and the fading illumination of the mirror behind me melded into a symphony of screams, my own and that of the disembodied souls trapped in the chaos. Each heartbeat echoed louder against the silence, reverberating, threatening to become its own living nightmare. Suddenly, the fall halted, and I was thrust into a realm of shifting shadows, an otherworldly landscape where the ground pulsed with an undulating rhythm. The air was saturated with an unnatural chill that seemed to gnaw at my skin, the remnants of my defiance hanging in the atmosphere like a bitter perfume. I stood upon a surface that felt both solid and ephemeral, as if I could slip through at any moment, drowning once more in an endless void. As I took my first steps forward, the architecture of the place revealed itself a labyrinth of obsidian thorns that jutted from the ground, twisting skyward like trees risen from a graveyard of forgotten dreams. It felt alive, each spire whispering to me in voices that mirrored my thoughts, taunting my every decision. Every note of dissonance twisted through the air like a siren's song, promising solace just beyond the next corner. I dared glance back, knowing I should not, but an insatiable curiosity gripped me. Behind, the mirror was still there, casting a dim radiance but now showing a new visage, an enormous eye, its iris swirling with galaxies and echoes of a past so distant I couldn't discern its nature. The eye blinked slowly, deliberately, and as it did, shadows poured forth from the cracked surface as if the very fabric of existence was unraveling. What lay before me was a premonition of despair, the very embodiment of what waited if I chose wrong. Choose wisely, a whisper danced through the air, but there was no source, merely the cacophony of tormented souls eager to weave their tale into mine. I pressed on, navigating the menacing maze, aware of unseen eyes tracking my movements, each gaze heavy with expectation. The landscape twisted, revealing glimpses of otherworldly horrors, the ground breaking open to reveal maw-like chasms, endless streams of liquid darkness bubbling like a brewing cauldron. In that moment of abject fear, I understood. I wasn't the only one navigating this nightmare. Shadows began to form into shapes all around me. Their tortured faces mirrored the memory of my own despair, people whom I had loved and lost. Their mouths moved silently, as if trapped beneath a glass wall, and for brief moments, their expressions reflected sheer terror, the acknowledgement of a darker horror looming over us all. Then, a sound riddled the air, like a distant whisper of thunder rolling through the void. A pulse ignited within the ground, resonating through the air. It felt alive, as if the very essence of fear stoked its energy. And then it manifested. A massive silhouette began hovering in the distance, a colossal shape that had no earthly bounds, its form grotesquely shifting like smoke unfurling amidst the darkness. It stretched forward, tendrils curling and waving like the nightmarish limbs of some cosmic beast, each arc pulling closer to my fragile reality. The sight was impossible, a discordant marriage of creation and annihilation that gripped me with such dread that my very breath threatened to solidify in my throat. And in that moment, clarity broke through the haze. This was no mere shadow, this thing was alive. It was the manifestation of the terror I had unleashed. It was tethered to my memories, to my fears, feeding off my essence and feeding into the other souls trapped here. I felt the crushing weight of their despair as if they were reaching through time, grasping for salvation. I was not just lost in my suffering but entwined in theirs. Just as I turned, a surge of energy struck me like a lightning bolt, sending me sprawling to the ground. I screamed, feeling the presence reach out, fingers of darkness wrapping around my limbs, pulling, urging me toward an unthinkable fate. My body fought against the onslaught, but every ounce of my resistance was draining. Slipping into a river of panic surged through my veins. In the haze of realization, I caught a third glimpse of the mirror, now fractured, reflecting the myriad horrors lurking behind me. And as I frantically searched for another escape, the heavy footsteps of a beast drew nearer, its source hidden, but my heart pounded in syncopation with its approach. "Remember who you are," the haunting words echoed again, growing louder. I realized in a moment of clarity that it wasn't just a reminder but an ultimatum. Recall who I was and claim my strength, or succumb to the endless void that craved to consume me whole. With a final push, I clawed my way back into the twisted maze, each movement a prayer to avoid the impending darkness. But amid my desperate flight, the ground beneath began to shatter once more, and a terrifying howl erupted, reverberating through every corner of this nightmare realm. The howling formed into a voice, a chorus of lost souls, a chilling serenade that compelled me to listen. Come home. And just as I felt the last remnants of hope fading, the colossal maw of the lurking horror burst forth from the shadows, revealing the depths of its abyss, the very jaws of despair hungry for my surrender. And then the ground gave way completely, dragging me into the yawning void below, where my fate awaited, twisted and unfathomable. The freefall didn't last long. The darkness was thick and suffocating, wrapping around my body like a shroud until the moment I hit something solid, an abrupt jolt driving the breath from my lungs and merging pain with disorientation. My hands instinctively reached out for support. Tumbling over the surface, I now lay upon a cold, slick slab of something unnameable. As I pushed myself upright, the chill of the ground soaked through my clothes, and I could feel a prickling sensation creeping along my spine. The air was heavy with an acrid scent, a blend of sulfur and decay, nearly suffocating. My heartbeat raced as I scanned my new surroundings. Visibility was low, shadows slinking around corners as figures danced at the edge of my vision. With every second that passed, recognition curled in my gut. This was a place stained with anguish, memories carved deep into the very essence of its structure. I stumbled forward, the weight of dread pressing down on me. The darkness here was more pronounced, like fog wrapping tightly around my limbs, distorting my perception of distance and direction. Each footfall echoed, warping into a cacophony of whispers that seemed to call my name. From time to time, an unearthly refrain of laughter would bounce against the walls, mocking my plight, igniting a fire of despair within me. Find them, a voice beckoned, unnaturally silky and deceptively tender. I staggered as ghostly wisps spiraled around me, shifting into the indistinct forms of those I had lost, friends, family, all residing in this tormented realm. Their faces morphed, flickering like dying candle flames, twisted by memories I had long buried. I wanted to scream, but the sound evaporated as terror settled deep in my throat. I blinked, trying to clear my mind, but the air buzzed with static, fragments of voices spilling into my consciousness like a mocking tide. Come home, they urged again, with an eerie harmony that sunk daggers into my resolve. We're waiting. Their beckoning felt tangible, casting a spell over my feet, urging me to follow. What were they asking of me? I couldn't let myself drift deeper into their web, but the thought of reuniting, feeling, and remembering flooded my heart with conflicting emotions. It gnawed at my will, a persistent reminder of the blissful ignorance I once had. The terrain around me began to shift, walls pulsated, twisting into grotesque forms. As if somehow alive, they inched closer, squeezing me between their nightmarish embrace. I clawed back, tearing through the illusion, refusing to succumb. However, the momentum swept through me, fractured thoughts collided, and all at once, the laughter rose to a frenzy. Face your fears! They screamed in unison, their voices sharp and serrated. Then, a rumbling echoed from deep within this hellscape, a low growl that reverberated through the very fabric of my being. Something stirred beneath the surface, an insatiable hunger that was all too eager to consume my feeble essence. I turned, desperate eyes darting everywhere, but the shadows congealed to form a single dreadful entity, an entity that was the very embodiment of my nightmares. It was massive and inhuman, exuding an energy that chilled my blood. A specter with a form that shifted and warped like smoke, its eyes were voids that offered nothing but insatiable yearning. Tendrils extended hungrily, swirling around me, the emptiness in those eyes promising nothing but eternal torment. Then out of the chaotic movement, a singular voice emerged from the nightmare, deep and resonant, dripping with malevolence. It whispered just above the din around me, "You escaped the abyss, but not the darkness within." In that instant, I understood what it was seeking. This entity wanted to consume not just my body but my memories, my anguish, the essence of who I was. Every painful recollection, every regret, these were the threads that would weave me into its being, binding me in a grim tapestry of despair. Before I could react, it lunged. My mind screamed at me to flee, and though my body resisted, I felt my legs begin to move. I tore through the abyss, frantic, adrenaline fueling every desperate stride as I tried to outrun that which was feeding on my fear. As I ran, the horrors around me morphed yet again. I could hear voices from my past, twisted into anguished screams. Whom had I lost? What had I let die in my wake? Suddenly, from behind, I felt a rush of cold air, something warm brushing against my neck, too intimate, too threatening. Then, just as I made the most harrowing turn, I caught a glimpse of the mirror once more, shimmering back into existence. This time the shards of glass formed with chilling precision a reflection of what I feared most myself, but twisted, grotesque and marred by the shadows of those I had failed. Embrace your truth, the chorus chimed, their laughter twisting into cackles that echoed with my own anguish. In that moment, I was gripped by horror, realizing the truth of the voice was rooted in my own heart. I stood at the precipice between despair and reality, teetering dangerously on the edge. The shadows surged, and I felt myself being drawn back toward them, and then I heard the voice, one clear and resonating amidst the turmoil, "Stop running. It's time to face what you truly are." With those words coursing through my veins, everything around me darkened further, the world collapsing, erasing the boundary between the nightmare and my deepest fears. As I prepared to confront whatever lay ahead, the floor beneath me cracked open, dragging me down into the deep maw of oblivion. The descent felt eternal, a free fall that swallowed my screams and clawed at my sanity. I plummeted into darkness, spiraling through the void until I landed on a surface that offered no mercy. Gritty sand that clung to my skin, filling my nostrils with an acrid scent of burned earth. The air was thick with a silence so profound it reverberated painfully in my ears, as if reality itself were holding its breath. As I lay there, panic mounted. My surroundings shifted uneasily, familiar yet strange, an expanse where twisted trees reached for a bruised sky, silhouetted against an angry crimson sun. Shadows slithered among them, dark forms that whispered promises of torment and despair. I pushed myself up, feeling the gritty grains shift, almost alive beneath me. In the distance, the horizon trembled, rippling like the surface of water disturbed by unseen forces. A low hum vibrated through the ground, thrumming in sync with my heartbeat. It was a sound both alluring and repulsive, threading through the air like a favorite lullaby tainted with the bitterness of grief, igniting memories I thought long buried. "Come and play," the voice sang, lyrical yet chilling, like a lullaby for lost souls. The shadows danced, forming into grotesque shapes, my family, my friends, their faces warped in anguish, reaching out for me with desperate, clawing hands. I stumbled back, the sight driving ice into my veins. "No! I didn't mean to leave you!" I shouted, but the words fell lifeless, swallowed by the cacophony of laughter that echoed all around me. The laughter twisted into sorrow, and then into rage as the figures contorted into monstrous visages, their eyes vacant yet pleading. "Face your guilt!" they howled, the sounds reverberating against the grotesque trees that leaned closer, their branches resembling the anguished hands of those I had lost. I turned and ran, legs pumping as I dashed toward the rising moon, which seemed to mock my escape with its cold, indifferent glow. But no matter how fast I sprinted, reality slithered along like a serpent, coiling around my feet, dragging me back into the grasp of those memories. The world closed in, a kaleidoscope of horrors fed by my shame, every face, every fateful moment flickering in front of me as if trying to remind me of my sins. The ground bucked beneath me, erupting in pockets of blackened earth that spewed forth smoke, smothering me in a blanket of despair. I choked on the bitterness, my heart racing as I stumbled to a halt, breathless and overwhelmed. "Leave me alone!" I screamed, falling to my knees, unable to withstand the crushing weight of their accusations. I had failed them, hadn't I? I was the architect of their demise, the carrier of burdens far too heavy for one soul. But then, amid the chaos, a flicker of movement caught my eye. The shadows began to retreat, pulling away to reveal a figure standing silently at the edge of a formless abyss. It was a silhouette cloaked in billowing darkness, unfathomable and chilling. The figure lifted an arm slowly, beckoning me forth. "Do you wish to know the truth?" It beckoned. Only the voice that slipped through its lips was not a whisper but a captivating melody that resonated deep within me. There was an unsettling familiarity in the tone that tugged at my heartstrings, drawing me toward the abyss where the shadows retreated, revealing a swirling portal of stars and cosmic horror. The sight evoked a visceral response, unearthing fear and an inexplicable yearning, a longing to uncover mysteries that should have remained buried. My foot moved involuntarily toward it, drawn by an energy that was magnetic yet terrifying. "Step into the darkness, and embrace what lies beyond," the figure encouraged, its face shadowed but undeniably familiar. But as I approached, the cosmic expanse suddenly warped into scenes of grief and loss, blinding me with a flash of clarity. Faces, too many faces, swirled around me, wailing in agony. They became a chaotic tempest, darting through the swirling cosmos, forever entwined in the horrific cycle of existence. "Flee!" my mind screamed. I knew all of these souls were beckoning me to join them, to become one of the lost, to set my trajectory toward the same fate. It was a siren's call, but no less deadly. Just as the abyss beckoned me forward, the figure shifted, causing shadows to pour forth like a volatile tide. I felt time itself warp, the air thickening with dread, and the echoes of laughter transformed into horrified gasps, threatening to swallow me whole. The portal shimmered, becoming increasingly unstable, and with one nail-biting glance back, I saw the last face I ever wanted to forget, my own. "What have you become?" the reflection whispered, and in that moment, I was thrown into the depths of the unknown, my own visage engulfed in the tide of shadows. As the universe twisted and howled, reality flickered one final time. The crimson sun began to fade, engulfed by a writhing darkness that seemed to whisper my name. "You're not done yet!" And in the shroud of nothingness that wrapped around me, I felt something sharp pierce through the veil, a chilling promise of the horrors awaiting me on the other side. The darkness closed around me like a thick fog, clinging to my skin, suffocating my senses. I gasped, my lungs burning, as I tumbled through a void of nothingness, spiraling and swaying, each disorienting shift pulling me deeper into the grasp of despair. Time became an abstract concept, no longer anchored by the rising and setting of suns. All that existed was an oppressive gloom formed from anguished cries and whispers of betrayal. As I fell, memories warped into grotesque caricatures, looming faces of those I loved. Their eyes sunk deep into their sockets, mouths twisted as if they were locked in a silent scream. I clutched my head, fighting against the flood of guilt that surged through me like poison. A flash of light broke through the inky black, illuminating fragmentary images, a child laughing, a gentle touch of a loved one, but each vision turned sickening as it morphed into a bleeding wound, a reminder of loss, of the things I had failed to protect. Suddenly, I landed again, not on sand this time, but on a surface so slick and wet it sent chills of revulsion surging through me. I rose unsteadily, glancing around to find I stood amid a warped forest, the trees now ancient and gnarled, their roots weaving into one another like serpents. The air was thick with a cloying mist, and the silence was shattered only by the heartbeat of the world, a slow, drumming pulse that resonated from deep within the ground. Every heartbeat felt familiar and terrifying as I realized it pulsated in sync with my very own. "Awaken," a voice rasped from the shadows, like the scraping of bone against stone. I turned to find a figure cloaked in shadows, eyes like pools of molten fire watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. It stood at the heart of the forest, surrounded by twisting limbs that seemed to bend and reach toward it, drawn like moths to a flame. "Who are you?" My voice trembled, a whisper half buried in fear, desperate to assert some sense of control over the madness enveloping me. The figure stepped into the sparse light. Its form flickered like a flame, revealing a face that was all too familiar. Insidiously, I recognized features marred by sorrow, a reminder of the weight I bore, the burden of a name I had hidden from myself. It was my mother. "Do you remember?" she asked, her voice an echo of both inquiry and accusation. "The truths we buried, the names we cast aside? This dance of shadows? You can't run from it any longer." I stumbled back, shaking my head in denial. "No, please." The air thickened with despair, visions of my past colliding with the present, shattering into a million shards of broken dreams. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. So many souls lost," she sighed, each word dripping with pain. "Yet you stand here, trapped in the cycle. You have to confront what you deny." The trembling forest pulsed with dark energy, every tremor vibrating through my bones. But then came a sudden crack, a rending sound that shattered the eerie silence. The trees shifted, and the ground convulsed beneath my feet, revealing a darkness that yawned wide like a ravenous maw. From the depths, something stirred. A force of tangled roots and branches morphed into something grotesque. A cacophony of voices shrieked in unison, echoes of despair resonating together in a tortured song that clawed at my mind. Forms twisted and writhed, shaped by anguish into a monstrous creature that towered above me, a living embodiment of every regret, every moment I failed to save those I lost. "You have brought us here," the entity growled, each tremor vibrating through my body. "Now you must pay the price." Panic surged within me, igniting my instincts to flee, but the shadows ensnared my legs, pulling me toward the abyss with gnashing jaws that sparkled like a night sky littered with countless stars. Each glimmer was a lost life, an unfulfilled promise. "Face the music!" shouted my mother, her voice a siren call engulfed by the rising tide of darkness. "Only then can you awaken from this nightmare." Eyes wide with realizing horror, I felt my heart thundering. In my chest, the monstrous entity surging closer, hungry for conviction and resolution. I was at the precipice of oblivion, caught between my past and the unfathomable dark that yearned to reclaim me. Just as the creature's maw opened wide, the forest erupted around me, roots bursting forth like tendrils reaching for my soul. "Help!" I screamed as the ground cracked beneath me, an opening to depths unseen, where the screams of the lost converged into a deafening cacophony that clawed at my sanity. In that moment, as my legs were pulled toward the unraveling void, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection, a warped shadow melting away, ripped apart by the very darkness I had inadvertently created. And then it happened, the world around me erupted into chaos, blinding light and swirling shadows collapsing into one singularity, and I realized, in my heart, that the depth of horror I faced was mine alone to confront, as the darkness beckoned me not to run, but to merge with it, forever lost. The corridor was alive, a seething labyrinth of shadows whispering ancient secrets, their voices scratching at the surface of my sanity. Each footstep echoed like the tolling of a death bell, reverberating through the suffocating gloom. I could feel the walls closing in, tight and claustrophobic, with an aura that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Panic clawed at my throat as I stumbled forward, searching for a way out of this hellscape I had inadvertently created. I turned a corner and found myself in a vast, empty chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. An oppressive weight filled the air, thick like fog, and the silence was more deafening than any scream. I swung around, desperate for answers, when suddenly I saw her, my mother, standing with her back to me, bathed in a sickly green light. She looked ethereal, her silhouette shimmering like a mirage. "Mom?" I called, my voice trembling with hope and dread. She turned slowly, revealing her face, yet something in her expression felt wrong, hollowed out as if consumed by shadows. "What is happening? I didn't mean for any of this." My voice cracked under the weight of regret. "You opened the door, my dear," she whispered, but her voice betrayed no warmth, instead echoing with an unfamiliar chilling malice. "You tore through the veil, pulling my essence into this dreadful existence. We are intertwined, you and I, forever bound to this darkness." The realization crashed over me like a wave of ice. She wasn't here to guide me, she had been ensnared by whatever horror lurked in these depths, just like me. The shadows around her began to spiral, twisting into shapes that resembled the tortured souls I had lost. They reached for me with desperate fingers, mouths moving as they begged silently, not for help, but for vengeance. "Mom, we have to escape!" I shouted, but she only smiled, a deep, unsettling grin that spoke of abandonment rather than reassurance. "Do you think you can leave without answering for your choices? You opened the door. You invited this darkness." The shadows laughed, a cacophonous echo that sent chills up my spine. I backed away, feeling the void at my back, and realized that maybe she was right. I had come here, drawn by morbid curiosity, and in doing so, I had awakened something that lay dormant for too long. I was its vessel, a conduit for despair, and even now, it crackled through my veins like electricity. The whispers of the dead grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. Join us. They chanted, a haunting melody laced with darkness. Become one with the abyss. No! I screamed, gripping my head between my hands, but the shadows enveloped me, drawing forth memories of each failure, every soul lost, every relationship tarnished. My heart raced as I staggered back, but the edges of the chamber danced with a malevolent shimmer, beckoning me inward. Face yourself, a voice echoed, chilling and profound. You are not the person you think you are. With each heartbeat, the truth clanged heavily against my mind like iron chains. I had traveled too far down the rabbit hole, and now there was no turning back. Did I really believe I could escape the horrors I had sown? The shadows conspired against me, pulling at the threads of my identity, unraveling my very essence until the world blurred around me. I can't do this! I bellowed, feeling madness clawing at the edges of my consciousness. I didn't mean for any of you to come here. But the shadows answered with laughter, a sinister chorus that echoed through the chamber. Suddenly, I saw it, a shimmering keyhole hidden within the swirling darkness, glistening like a forbidden fruit. My heart surged with newfound determination, a means to escape. Grabbing the key that had fallen from my grasp earlier, I rushed towards it, desperation fueling my every move. I could feel the shadows closing in behind me, gnashing their teeth, angry at my defiance. In a final act of desperation, I thrust the key into the lock. But as I turned it, a blistering scream erupted from the depths of the shadows, a deafening protest that tore at my very soul. Did you really think you could escape? My mother's voice sliced through the silence, and the shadows coalesced. That twisted semblance of her smiled once more, and the horror dawned upon me. You've taken the form of losing, just as I have. You opened the door for them to claim you, to become one of the myriad shadows lost in this realm. The door creaked open, revealing a blinding light that frightened me to the core, illuminating the horrific truth lurking within. The light refracted, and in its rays, I witnessed endless rows of mirrors displaying the grotesque reflections of my lost loved ones, faces twisted in agony as they pleaded for release. I was trapped no matter which direction I turned. A reflection of my deepest failures stared back at me. It hit me then. I had not freed myself by opening that door. I had become the keeper of this cursed reality, a gateway that demanded a sacrifice. And at last, it dawned on me. I was to be the vessel to carry forth this darkness, the unwitting architect of pain, bound to watch as it seeped into the world like poison. As dread closed in around me, I felt an overwhelming urge to scream, but the voices and shadows merged together, drowning my agony. My mother's figure warped grotesquely in the light, melding with the shadows, revealing her true self, no longer a guiding spirit but the embodiment of the very horror that had once haunted me, and as the realization broke through, the ground began to tremble violently beneath my feet, echoing the rhythmic beating of a heart, my heart pulsing with the essence of everything I had lost. I was not free. I had merely become part of the darkness, and there would be no escape. Welcome home, the voices whispered in unison, barbing my soul with a last, chilling note. The door might have opened, but behind it lay true horror, a haunting truth that would echo in every peeling shadow and anguished cry. As the dark hollowed out my identity, I understood. The shadows were never truly gone. They were inside me, waiting, lingering eternally. And as the abyss claimed me whole, laughter echoed all around, resonating with a single chilling last word, a reminder that would forever haunt me in the recesses of my mind: home.